And here we are for the next interview. I am privileged to be able to introduce Dr. Jon Carlson, who is the next person that I'll be speaking with. Dr. Carlson has lots of credits and accolades. I'll just highlight a few. He is a distinguished professor of psychology and counseling at Governor State University in Illinois. He also maybe will tell us a little bit more about what he does in Wisconsin, where he is now. He's been the author of numerous books and numerous articles, including professional articles. He was honored with the award of being a living legend from the American Counseling Association and from the American Psychological Association. He's a distinguished psychologist. There's other things. If you want to know more specifically, please go to the thumbnail sketch about him. But mostly what I'd like to do is move forward and start talking. So welcome, Jon. We're happy to have you here.
I'm delighted to be here, Nancy. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's going to be
concept.
Yeah, all very interesting stuff. So when you think about, let me ask kind of a general question.
Sure.
When you heard that we wanted you to come and be part of our conversation on mental health and happiness, what came up for you?
Well, the first thing I thought about was mental health. I think of William Glasser, and he's somebody that we share in common, along with many of the people that are watching the program. And I remember talking with Bill, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and he and I were talking about just what is mental health. And it was amazing as we would go places and we would talk, and we would look at audiences of 500 to 1,000 people, all professional counselors and psychologists and teachers and social workers, and we would ask, how many of you have ever had a class in mental health? And maybe one, maybe two hands have gone up. I think it's almost like when we went into space and we all of our cameras were focused away from the Earth, and then all of a sudden we turned the cameras around and we saw what beauty there was. And it seems like we've missed all the beauty by focusing so much on what's wrong and not on what's right. What is mental health? And so when Bill did that, that's the first thing that came to my mind about just how we really have a mental illness profession. Nobody knows a lot about mental health. Yeah.
And interestingly, this day, World Mental Health Day, declared by the World Health Organization, which is one of the few places that actually has a working definition of mental health, that they're concentrating on schizophrenia. That's the focus of the conference for them, or the day. I don't think there actually is a conference, but I found that interesting. I'm not so sure schizophrenia really is a reflection of mental health, but I didn't do a lot more research than that.
Yeah, there's so much that we've been trained to look at. I think one of the reasons that attracted me to the work of Alfred Adler is that Alfred Adler was a physician and was a psychiatrist before we really had psychiatrists. And he would go around and work with people, and people would describe the patients as this was wrong with them, they had this problem, and they would go on, and then they would say, so Dr. Adler, what do you think? And Dr. Adler says, that's not what I see. Because he was looking for what was right. He would say, I see a vibrant life in front of me. I see somebody who's really interested in growing, somebody who wants to improve, somebody who wants to heal, somebody who has a love for life. I like the twinkle in their eye. And so, I think Dr. Glasser was much the same way. And so it's another reason why I was drawn to him as well.
When I actually did some studying about Dr. Adler's work and thought, oh my gosh, there's an awful lot that Dr. Glasser says that's kind of like right out of Adler's mouth. and wondered. And as far as I know, at least in the brief conversations I had with Dr. Glasser about it, he was not familiar with Adler's work. But there's a whole lot that these guys could have had a good chat.
I think that's why I made Dr. Glasser a member of the Adlerian Society, and why he made me a member of the reality therapy group. And I think he realized that connection.
Yes, absolutely. One of the biggies, it's a choice theory concept. Is all behavior is purposeful? That's right out of Adler. Doesn't necessarily matter who got there first, but that they were saying the same thing. There must be a grain of truth there somewhere.
Yeah, there sure is. Yeah.
So when do you ever talk about, define mental health? Would you say you have a working definition of mental health?
Again, I would defer to Dr. Glasser's definition, in which he said that mental health is getting along with all the significant people in your life. You get along with your partner, you get along with your children, you get along with your parents, your friends, your work colleagues. But that's really, so important. And I'd probably take that a step further, and that's if your essential physiological and safety needs are met. Because I think it's pretty hard to look into these more health or esteem needs or wants if those things are not met.
Okay, so more of a Maslow thing, that the safety and security bit comes first.
Hierarchy of needs, I think, is what I was referring to.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what makes relationships so important. And I thought with Dr. Glasser, when he mentioned that to me, how true that was. When my wife and I are getting along, I feel great. And when we're not getting along, I don't feel very good, or I'm having conflict with one of my children, or a work colleague, or a sibling. And I've noticed in my work, it's true for so many that they nod their heads and say that's true. So that's my working definition.
Okay, nice. And how about, do you pair it with happiness, like we have mental health and happiness?
No.
Okay.
I think we're capable of being happy, whatever that means, all the time. And I don't see the two as necessarily being related. Because I think sadness and unhappiness is a part of life.
Yes.
And, in Buddhism, we kind of talk about, joy and sadness. That's all part of the deal. Yeah. And if you really hold on too tight to joy, it's going to leave. Or if you hold on too tight to sadness, the same thing. We just need to learn how to accept what life gives us. Mm-hmm. There's so much in life we just can't change.
Yeah.
And yet many people spend long parts of their life trying to change the unchangeable. I think that's where the serenity prayer that Niebuhr developed, called, we have to accept the things we can't change and change the ones we can. Something like that.
And the wisdom to know the difference. I fear that I am guilty. Less so now as I'm getting a little bit older, but I'm sure I can change it.
Right. Yeah.
The wisdom of, no, not so much. Yeah. Okay, so that leads me to, well, actually, I did want to ask you an additional question. So I know you've spent a good part of your life teaching and training our counselors to go out into the world, into the profession. Do you ask them to come up with their own working definition of mental health?
That's one of the things I do. We ask that, but most of them just kind of go along with mine. I wish they could come up with their own, but as they think about it, it's just behaviors they can come up with.
Okay, because my recent experience here in Colorado, we're doing some interesting things, but my recent experience is asking people in the profession, how would you define mental health? Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, the answers I get is, that's an interesting question. That's the most consistent answer I get. Mm-hmm. Or, well, it depends on who you talk to. And I think to myself, if I'm a person seeking help from a mental health counselor, I want them to have an idea of the target they're aiming for. Otherwise, I'm not sure that they're helpful. I would find them particularly helpful. And that seemed to be more of a, I tried not to insult them, but saying not too much like that. But at the same time, I wondered about it. And so it's interesting that I'm sure they did go along with you, because I'm sure they didn't have any other better ideas.
Right. And I think what happens, though, is that they do begin to look for strengths. They do study positive psychology, and they're much more likely to define what people do rather than what they can't do or don't do.
Yeah.
A lot of our research in psychotherapy, points to that 40% of change has to do with the client helping themselves or using their own strengths. And in order to do that, we have to help them see these strengths and help them understand that. Yeah.
So it must be from your perspective, because I know from my perspective, which isn't quite the longevity as yours, that it's nice to see the pendulum is finally swinging. That it's not all about the deficit. It's not only about what's wrong, but looking for what's right. Yes, is that your experience as well?
Oh, yeah, for sure. You asked a moment ago if I ask my students to define, mental health. I don't, but what I do often suggest they do is I suggest they outdo their dogs. Because most of us have dogs or pets that are a lot happier than we are. And we can learn a lot by modeling, from them. Yeah.
And they're true practitioners of unconditional positive regard.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So what would you say is at this point, well, it doesn't have to be at this point, the things that you find the most challenging for you personally, or for those of us who are in the field and facing the kinds of things that we're facing? What do you feel is an obstacle that's still in your way, perhaps?
Well, I think we want to externalize everything. We want to look out into the world for a technique, a solution, something that we can do to someone else. We're always kind of looking out here. It's really hard to look within. And I'm really convinced that we need to do more mindfulness activities. We need to do more inner space studies. We need to understand ourselves a lot better from within, much from without. Another part of research tells us that 30% of change has to do with the ability to create a relationship with someone else. And that comes so much with our ability to be present with those we work with. And, they can tell if we're preoccupied, if we're thinking about something else, if there's something else that's going on, if we're not truly in the room with them.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the work that I would do with students is to help them to create more presence, to create, really to be here now.
And are there specific exercises that you would recommend for people who aren't necessarily studying to be counselors but are in the world?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different meditation activities. One of my favorite that the viewers might like is what's called a Metta meditation. And Metta is M-E-T-T-A. And Metta is a word for loving kindness. And it was taught to me by a Thai woman who's an avid Buddhist. I've gone to Thailand every year for the last 12 or 15 years, and I do work there with Thai people. A loving kindness meditation is one that's really quite simple. You begin each day by closing your eyes and breathing slowly and breathing deeply. And then first of all, picture yourself. Clearly picture yourself, and then you send a message: may I be peaceful, may I be happy, may I be safe, may I be free. And then you move on to those that are close to you. Like I would move on to my wife, Laura, and I would picture her and say, may you be peaceful, happy, safe, and free. And then I would move on to each of my 5 children, all the way down to my youngest, Callie, who's watching this program. And I would picture her each day and send her that same message. And I do that to their partners. I do that to my friends. And then I move away to those people who I see each day but I don't really know. The person who gets my coffee each morning, the person I run into in the gas station or on the elevator. And then finally, I'll go through and I'll picture the people I don't get along with, the people that I struggle with. Even if I do get along with them, they're a struggle. And I send them a message that they be peaceful, that they be happy, that they be safe, that they be free. And if you do that each day, you're going to be amazed at how much nicer people are.
Ah.
Do that for 2 weeks and report back to me if
Nice.
you don't notice an amazing change.
Yeah, that's awesome. So the magic of sending it out, and it changes the other people. Unbelievable. That's lovely.
We start to notice people previously we don't notice. We start to attend to them. We start to value them. And just life starts to work so much better for everyone.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's lovely. That's truly lovely. Certainly a sense of mental health and happiness that goes with that one. The notion, I'm sure, I know I'm not alone. At least I hope I'm not alone. I can easily, kind of imagine doing all of that with the people that I love, the people that are important, the people I care about, the ones for whom it's easy to send that and have that intention. The ones that are harder are the ones that are harder. The ones that they're harder because, quote, they're my enemy, or they're the people I struggle with because perhaps they reflect back to me more parts of myself I'm not happy to see. Thank you very much.
Personally, Nancy, I noticed that with time I have very few people on that list.
Yes, nice.
Few people, and because I start to think about what is it about me that keeps this struggle going.
Yeah.
What do I need to do differently?
Yes. Awesome. That's lovely. Do you have another one? You gave us such a good one. You want to give us another one?
There's a variety of different types of meditation. I just got back from Lithuania, and I was teaching mindfulness meditation there. Gave a series of lectures and went through different types, and each of us has something different that we like to do. I think one that they found particularly helpful was to notice pains that they have during the day, like a pain in the back, or their knee hurts, or they have a headache. And so what I suggest they do is to change their relationship with the pain. And so what they say, well, what are you talking about? Well, most of us try to make pain go away. So we create conflict within ourselves. And so when a headache occurs, and if there's any viewers that are having a headache at this time, we can make this go away quite quickly. And what you would do is begin with a few deep breaths. And you would focus exactly on where is your headache? Where exactly in the body is it? What part of the head does it locate? And don't be surprised, by the way, if the headache doesn't shift to a different part of the body. You move to the headache, where it is, and then you move to what color it is, what shape it is, and then how big it is. If it could hold water, how many cups of water. And you do that slowly, where is it located? What shape is it? What color is it? How big is it? And then you take in a deep breath and you repeat it again. And pretty soon you start to know that it begins to dissipate. And we realize just how we can change, the way that we relate with ourselves to being more accepting and more understanding, rather than conflictual and fighting and trying to make things go away.
Very fascinating.
But this is part of a formula for happiness. Part of it,
Yes.
and there was a book that I wrote a few years ago with a dynamic psychologist named Pat Love. I don't know if you've ever met Pat, but she's well worth. That's a real name too, Love.
Absolutely, it's so cool.
Hot Monogamy was one of her favorites. But Pat and I wrote a book called Never Be Lonely Again. And this was a book about a trip that she and I made to visit the Dalai Lama. And we had an audience with him 5 or 6 years ago. And then we went back, after that. And we talk about how that impacted us. And we really came up with 5 questions, 5 things that people need to do to never be lonely again. But as I was thinking about this program, I really think they're the same things that people would need to do if you want to be happy again. And the first is a question that begins with, who am I? Who am I really? So if I would say to you, Nancy, I say, who are you? And you'd say, well, I'm a woman. And I'd say, yeah, that's just your gender, though. Who are you really? And I'd say, who are you? And I heard you this morning on your interview, and you were talking about, the pride you have in your 2 children and how they were your teachers. And so you'd probably say, I'm a mother. And I'd say, yeah, but that's a role you have, Nancy. Who are you really? And I would continue to ask that question to try to help us find out, who are we really? And much of our loneliness and unhappiness is when we are being someone else. We're not truly being ourselves. And few of us really take the time to figure out who we are. And I was really pleased. Like 3 years ago, I had an illness that was, I didn't have a very good chance to live. I was serious cancer and other complications. And I came out of all that knowing that who I am is who I am. I like being who I am, and I like doing what I'm doing. I don't think we should all get cancer to find that out, but that's one thing I got out of it. So the first is, who am I? The second is are you involved in meaningful work? Is your work meaningful? And sometimes work can be your life calling. It can be your passion. And I think that's probably true for me. But other people have a job so they can do their work. They have a job that pays the rent so they can coach the baseball team, the Little League team, or they can run the Girl Scout troop, or they can work at the church or work in the community. So we each have to have meaningful work to feel like we're giving something back. A third is that we need to connect with other people. We need to have 3 to 5 good friends that we talk to. And we talk to on a regular basis. And I have friends that I've had for many, many years. Day doesn't go by without talking to 2 or 3. One has been my close friend since age 3. And,
wow, you're lucky.
We're still close. We talk every day, every other day. So having these connections with people, and these have to be real people, by the way. They can't be your cyber friends, or what I sometimes call imaginary friends. Like somebody says, I've got 343 friends on my, they're not really friends, they're in your imagination. So these are real people who have flesh and bones, and you can touch and make contact to, and you do. We find that people who rely on electronics for friendship tend to become lonelier and lonelier and more detached over time. I look back to what old Bill Moyers told us many years ago. He said, we're raising our children with appliances. At the time, he was talking about televisions, but now it's computers, iPads, etc., not people. And so we become less and less connected with people. A third is, or fourth is, the question has to do is, am I giving back? Am I involved actively in some social project to better others? What am I giving? You know, for me, it's going to Thailand every year, and now I'm taking students every year with me and teaching them to appreciate this culture. You can't learn about culture in a book. You can't. You can't. You need to go. You need to experience this, and so that's my social justice. That's my piece. You know, my son and I and my colleague Jeffrey Kotler, we wrote a book a couple years ago. This is helping beyond the 50-minute hour. I ask your viewers, many of them will be counselors and social workers. Do you practice what you preach?
Yeah.
What do you do that helps others, or do you only do it when you're on duty? That's being phony. And this fifth area, it's kind of a hard one to talk about, and it's hard to understand. It's, are you on purpose? Are you living your life's purpose? Like, what is your purpose? Why are you here? What's your calling? And we struggle with this. The book a few years ago that was the best-selling book was one that was called, On the Life of Purpose. It was written by the minister, Rick Warren. And it was a book that everyone bought. I didn't care for the book at all. Sorry, Rick. I didn't like the book. I think lots of people didn't like it either, but I think they bought it because they're striving for purpose. Why am I here? It's an existential crisis. If you try to figure out what is my purpose, you think about, what do you want to have written on your tombstone, or what do you want to have written in your obituary, or what do you do when you can do whatever you want to do? What do you dream about? When you were young, what did you want to be when you grew up? Some of these questions will help us to find out, what's my passion, what's my calling, what's my purpose. See, if you're on purpose, you're going to feel happy. So we can say happy, we can say lonely. If you know who you are, if you have meaningful work, if you have 3 to 5 good friends, if you're doing work for other people, you're helping others, and if you're living out your purpose, you're going to be happy, and you're not going to be lonely again. That was a big mouthful, sorry.
Well, no, I don't. Please do not apologize. That's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, one of the things that I know we've already done, and I want us to continue to do, there has become a cultural shift towards happiness. And a couple of our other guests have spoken about that as well. Okay, I'm not happy. What's wrong with me? I'm not happy enough. And again, it's not terribly surprising to me, as I bet it isn't for you as well, in our commercial society, that it's not the stuff, and you can accumulate all the stuff you want, and you're still going to miss whether or not you're happy or not.
The more you work to get more and more stuff, that as soon as you get it, you don't want that anymore. You want something else.
Right, because Wall Street's the advertising industry certainly tells us that you will get that relationship, that meaning, that purpose, if you only purchase this thing. But that's part of the culture in which we live. And there really seems to me that there is more of a shift, that mindfulness isn't as wacky as it used to be, that there are more people thinking about other kinds of spiritual practices like Buddhism as well as others. Again, one of the things I find curious is, as we baby boomers are hitting more of our middle age, we're really following what Jung said would happen, which is we'd start thinking more about the meaning of what we're doing. And that's okay with me. I'm happy that I'm along for the ride as well, and I'm part of it. We're also working hard to start making the shift from happiness isn't a thing. Happiness is a choice, but it's not a choice. If you do the metta tomorrow, you're probably not going to feel a whole lot better tomorrow. You might feel a little bit better. You might feel a little bit better enough for you to even feel it, but maybe not. It isn't until you do that daily for 2 weeks, then you might say, oh, huh, look it, that person's nicer to me than I've noticed them being nice to me before. That it comes from the inside. It's an inside job. So I appreciate your sharing those ideas.
And that's not why you do it, though. You do
Right.
it because it's who you are.
Yes.
And, you know, one of the things I've noticed about the people who are in the happiness business, that they're not particularly happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I don't know what that says, but...
Well, I know for me personally, I was, you know, I would say I've had a fairly charmed life, good parents, good family, but then I did hit that middle part of my life where things were kind of not so great for a long time. And one of the things I decided to do during that hard time, both my parents died, my marriage ended, my children went to college, and the dog ran away. And I really thought, well, maybe I need to be alone now. It was clear, whether I thought it was or not. But at the same time, yeah. But I also thought, I'm going to do a little research on happiness, because it's more fun to research happiness than it is to research depression. It just is. That doesn't necessarily mean I'd find it, but it was more uplifting for me than researching more sadness. To learn about laughing yoga. Yeah, that sounds like a class I want to try. Let me laugh for an hour. Even if I don't feel happy, I know I'll feel better at the end of the hour than I did crying for an hour. So it was.
Yeah. One of the places that I teach at is the Esalen Institute in Big Sur, California. And the Esalen Institute has been in practice since the 1960s, and the kinds of things that they've talked about there, it's a human potential center. And, you know, I've always been intrigued about trying to figure out what we can be, who we can be, how we can go beyond being, you know, I think we limit ourselves so much. I don't think that happiness needs to be a contest. I mean, that's not what I'm talking about. I just think, you know, we don't really push ourselves enough. And I love going to Esalen, and I love having my eyes opened up to all of the things that I've been blinded to when I go there. And I think we need more places like that. We need more opportunities. And, you know, people aren't going to places like that as much as they once were. So we need programs like this, I guess, to go to them, you know.
Well, it is one of the things I was thinking when you were talking about there is a greater distance with having connections only with cyber people. At the same time, one of the things that we've been talking about, the small committee of mental health and happiness people that have been putting this together, if we didn't live in the times we live, you and I wouldn't be having this chat right now. We wouldn't be able to talk to the people who are in Malaysia, the people who are in Australia. We could, but it wouldn't be as relatively easy. And probably not to be able to say, look, we're going to offer this summit to anybody who wants to just show up for free. All you need is a computer. What a privileged place we are, that is a place all of us could be. But it's finding the balance and the relationship with the things that don't override the relationship with ourselves and people. Yeah.
You know, electronics aren't evil. You know,
right.
They have a place.
Right.
Like everything else, we tend to be consumed by things.
Yes, yes. Especially for those of us who are, it's a new toy, so it's either a scary new toy, oh, that would be me, or it's an amazing new toy. Less scary than it used to be. You know what, I realize I'm not checking in, and I need to see if we've got questions for you.
You know, personally, I'm just happy that there's people like Jon Carlson who can, you know, manage the toys for me, so.
Absolutely. Okay, doesn't look, I think we're all right in terms of any questions that might or might not be coming in. So I get to ask more of mine. So did you start as a psychologist, as an educator, as a Buddhist? Can you tell us a little bit about your journey and how you've arrived to where you are now? And I don't know, do you call yourself a Buddhist, or you're practicing? You practice Buddhism?
I'm back to where I started. You know, I kind of grew up in southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois, and I teach in northern Illinois, and I live in southern Wisconsin. So I haven't gotten very far. I've traveled
You
around
went
the
around
world.
the world to get back there, Jon.
Yeah, yeah. I was originally trained as a teacher, and I'm not sure if that was a calling or I was an elementary school teacher, so I could always have a girl to go out with. I was the only man in the classes, and so that worked out quite well. And then I moved into counseling. I became fascinated by counseling, and I was so interested in catching children early on. And I was an elementary school counselor in the local Lake Geneva school for 32 years. We'd go there once a week and tell stories and trying to do preventative mental health, to try to catch problems before they occur, to teach kids problem-solving skills, to teach them to like themselves and other people. And I worked with parents at that time too. And a little later, I became the spokesperson for the STEP program, Systematic Training for Effective Parenting, and did radio and TV and traveled around the world talking about parenting. Somewhere along the line, I became a coach. I became a distance runner. I became a family therapist and then a psychologist. And then I started making videos and training materials. And I've made 300 videos that, just changed my life. Getting the chance to watch and meet amazing people every week. And getting a chance to meet you here today, you learn so much. And I was very interested in relationships, and I still am. And I try to figure out how can men and women get along for long periods of time. I look around, and so many of my friends and so many of my colleagues are not married anymore, or they're divorced, or they're on wife number 12 or husband number 6, and so how do you maintain a relationship over time is something that I've become very, very interested in. I wrote a program called Time Training in Marriage Enrichment with a book called Time for a Better Marriage that talks a lot about my ideas. And getting back to you asked about Buddhism, when I was with the Dalai Lama and we had this audience with him, one of the questions was asked to His Holiness was, so what is love? And he answered in his way that makes you almost think like he's not listening, because he said things so simply. He said, love is the wish to make another happy. Boy, wouldn't that change our marriages if we looked at them that way, that love, is the wish to make another happy. Because so much of us are saying, what about me? What about me? And the ego gets in the way. And others of us are trying to make people happy, but, we're following the golden rule. And the golden rule doesn't work in marriage. I don't know if you knew that. I don't want to offend a lot of people, but the golden rule is do unto others what you want done unto you. And see, in marriage, you have to do unto other people what they want done unto them, which is really what the golden rule is. Too many of us put a lot of energy into doing to our partners what we want, not what they want. And I think it's important, in relationships that somewhere along the line that people learn that. And so I've become really interested in training people with skills, whether it's skills how to be a counselor, skills how to be a parent, skills how to be a human being. I think that those are really important. So that's kind of the path I've taken. So,
Awesome. My friend Kim Olver calls that the platinum rule.
Right.
It is the golden rule, but as you say, many people think it's. And again, from a good choice theory Glasser point of view, if I'm helping you what you want from your quality role picture, as compared to, well, you must want the same thing I want, which is
yeah.
So talk to me some about, I know you did talk a little bit about the idea of when you're experiencing what we might call a negative emotion, to you didn't say embrace it, but you just said accept it. Can you say a little bit more about that? Because I do know that there's, there certainly is the experience that if you have a negative emotion, that's not good, so you'll either run to the doctor to get a medication to get rid of it, or you'll run to your own drugs and alcohol to obliterate it. Do whatever you can to eliminate it. Even the notion that it's called the negative emotion instead of it's just part of the full array of emotion. Can you share some thoughts about that?
Well, I think a lot of people do, try to get rid of things, get rid of uncomfortable emotions. But, uncomfortable emotions are part of the deal. That's part of the deal of life. Nobody escapes it. We have joy, we have sorrow. And if we feel sorrow, we can just take in a deep breath and say, it'll pass. If we have joy, we can take in a deep breath and say, it'll pass.
Yeah.
We get into trouble when we try to hold on to one or we try to push the other one away. We set up this conflict inside of ourselves. Now, demands or stresses on us can be put on a scale of 1 to 10. So if you have an uncomfortable emotion, say sadness, and you're deeply sad, say a level 5 out of 10. We can handle anything from 1 to 10. But we can't handle anything more than that. But what happens is, how do we react to this sadness? We say, I can't be sad, or why am I sad? Or this isn't fair, or we fight it. And our reaction to sadness is a 5 too. And so this 5, and then reacting at a 5, that doesn't become a 10, that becomes a 25. And there's no way that we can deal with it. So what I try to help people to do is to urge them to accept a 5. Yeah. This too will pass. This sadness will pass. This pain will pass. What do you think it'll be like in 10 days from now, or 10 years from now, or 10 weeks from now? You'll have a hard time recalling it. And as we can start to accept things like that, we don't make them into these big catastrophes, these 25s.
Oh, that makes a whole lot of sense to me. Yeah, it's not that it doesn't double it; it's exponential. Yeah.
I mean, there's very few things that bother me, and they don't bother me for very long. When I find myself bothered, I just try to take in a deep breath, and I try to understand what's going on. Where is it in my body? What does it look like? What shape is it? What color it is? So I change my relationship to my emotions.
Yeah.
Rather than fighting them, trying to make them go away, I accept them. And as we do that, we go through life a lot more contented. We go through life, a lot more at peace with ourselves. Some people say, well, you're just dead, you're not. No, if anything, I'm more aware than ever. I'm more aware of things. I can describe what goes on, and I have more energy and more to offer, to watch and to take in what's going on. But so many of us are trying to change things, and I was taught to do that too. And I've had to relearn.
Yes.
How to do things.
Well, I watch it I have young grandchildren, and I watch with their parents. You don't feel that, or it's not so bad, or, yeah, we never would say that to an infant who's crying. Don't feel that way. Yeah, really? You keep saying that, and you're just still going to have a crying baby. They're crying for a good reason, and when you help them, they stop crying. That's the great news. There is a question that has come in. So I have to put my glasses on. How can an Adlerian therapist help clients improve their happiness and well-being? That comes from a student at Murray High School. Murray High School is still with us, high school student.
Yeah, I think there's so many ways, and I think part of it is just in the way you treat the person as they come in, the kinds of things that you focus on. You really attempt not to label them, first of all, and you try to be present for them and honor them. You try to remember all that they say. You try to ask questions and have genuine interest. I think that's valuing someone. That helps a lot. They feel as though they count, that there's meaning. Another thing an Adlerian therapist would do would be to normalize. Many people feel the same way. It's perfectly normal for you to be like this. Why wouldn't you feel this way? Somebody will come in and they'll say, "Oh, I'm depressed." And say, "Yeah, I'd be depressed too if I have gone through all you've gone through." And so much of this, it creates, I feel bad, and then I feel bad for being bad.
Right.
And so we really have to help people, deal with that. I think another really important thing is to provide hope. And I think it's really important that when somebody comes in, you give them something so that they leave with this feeling of hope, whether it's an activity to do, whether it's a new way to look at their problem, whether it's a new way to look at themselves, but some way to leave with hope. Yeah. Those are some of the things an Adlerian therapist would do, as it relates to helping somebody to be happier, more empowered, feel better about themselves, the world they're in.
And this is the showing my lack of deep study of Adler. Homework, wasn't Adler the first who actually talked about giving clients homework of things to do, not just what's happening here?
Yeah. Yes. And he did that. He also turned the chairs around so that people faced one another, so they looked at another. Another thing that Adler did that I try to do is live demonstrations with people with real problems.
Right.
We do this in Thailand, and the Thai people say, "How come in America you do this in a closed room? Doesn't everybody have the same problems?" I go, "Yeah, they do. Yeah, they're universal." And then they say, "Well, if I don't know about my neighbor's problems, how can I help them? I love to help people." I said, "Isn't that a good thing?" "Yeah, that's really a good thing to help other people." So our whole concept about mental healing, I think, is wrong. Adler had this on a stage where the person on the stage sharing their problems was really the teacher. They were teaching other people how to be responsible, talk about their problems, and then do something about it. Yeah.
Well, so how how's that for articulate? Well, part of what I find disturbing. Let's go back to the wisdom to tell the difference. This is I'm showing off my lack of wisdom in being able to discriminate and tell the difference. But part of what I see happening is that although there are certainly a large enough moving more towards connecting and attachment parenting, what a notion, stay attached to your children, and meditation, and at the same time there's more distancing, the mental illness with medication, which the broken brain and isolation. I have this picture in my head that I know I made up. I'm telling the story of the child, the young adult who shot the children in Newtown. That was one unhappy child who had been isolated for years and years and years. There's no doubt in my mind. And his mother was equally isolated. So it's not just in the teaching of the practitioners, it's also the victimization of people who are seeking help and now become more and more isolated. Those are the things that sadden my heart. I just wonder how you make sense of that for yourself.
Well, I think we've had behaviors like that for all time, but
Right.
I think we're just becoming more and more disconnected as people, and we're less and less available. We used to have front porches. Now we have back decks with big walls around them. A man wrote a book a few years ago called Bowling Alone, and talked about how there's more people bowling, but there's fewer bowling leagues. So people aren't in leagues. They're not joining clubs. They're not going to churches. They're not active in community groups like they once were. We're isolating. We're pulling back. And it's happening. Nobody would accept the world we've created if we just created it today. It's almost like the old story of the frog in a pot of boiling water, where if you took a frog and you threw it in a pot of boiling water, it would jump out. If you put it in a pot of water and gradually heated it, you'd boil the frog. And not that that's a good metaphor, but a lot of things have happened. And in some ways, we're being cooked. And, just like the mental health movement, today let's talk about schizophrenia. Well, isn't that a mental illness?
Right.
We need to talk about rapture. We need to talk about resilience. We need to create a whole new vocabulary. That, like, we've got over 400 ways to be mentally ill. Do we have 400 ways to be mentally healthy, or mentally optimal, or mentally, can we categorize people, in those ways? No, we don't have a clue about that. Maybe with positive psychology, just things like, when I think of positive psychology, we're so concerned about PTSD.
Yeah.
But for every case of post-traumatic stress, there's a case of post-traumatic growth. There's people who went through trauma and went beyond their wildest dreams, didn't know that they could handle such things. So somewhere between these extremes is where most of us are.
Right.
How do we teach that resilience, though, that these post-traumatic growth people have, as opposed to, focusing so much on what's wrong,
Right.
and putting more and more money into it, more and more pills, and more. When I've worked with people with PTSD, we've done some amazing things.
Right.
But we've begun with, so what did you learn from this experience? How are you a better person because of this experience?
Oh, what a project, Jon. You want to join me in creating that project? We're going to come up with the whatever the opposite of DSM would be. But I love that idea. Let's have at least 400 descriptions.
It makes sense, doesn't it?
Oh my gosh, It's brilliant. Even if you don't have to replace it, but at least let's have some balance. Have one sit next to the other.
Right.
Oh, I love that notion. And again, one of the things, it's not an original Dr. Glasser thought, but his whole notion of the brain being a negative feedback loop, and that's very much from engineering.
Right.
But it's the mismatch. It's the stress of the mismatch that drives the behavior. But as a result of that, our brain doesn't necessarily pay attention to when things are right, when things are going well, and we need to train ourselves to pay attention to when things are going well, because we'll miss it if we don't do that. All right, we got another question, and this is from Dr. Wobbleding, Bob Wobbleding, who also says it's good to see you, and then asks, what's your next major project?
Yeah, Dr. Wobbleding is a longtime good friend and the leader of reality therapy, and I'm glad he's tuned in. He's also a living legend in the field of counseling. What I've done most recently, I'm more interested in looking at the aging process and just really trying to understand what it's like to grow older, what it's like to live with chronic illness. and to notice how invisible we become once we get to be 65 or 70, and how much wisdom we have to offer without having venues to offer them in. And so the more and more I read, the more and more confused people are on this last inevitable stage that we all face. Thank you, Val.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Let me know. Keep us in the loop where you are with that, because you're not. I'm not sure it starts at 65, but it's okay that it may become more.
We're actually doing a book that begins with over 50. So.
Okay. Well, there's an interesting thing that happens, and I don't know if it's gender specific, but I know for women, it often happens earlier. But may not, because of some of the gender gaps that are less happening now in today's generation than happened in our generations about men and women.
Yeah, we start to lose meaningful places in life. We have some roles that we start to lose, whether it's as men or women or people. Yeah.
Some of the research I did read recently talked about that the older population is a really good place for the younger 20s to 35s to seek help for some problems because of some of the things you're talking about. You know, as a grandparent, I know if my children don't eat spinach, it's not the end of their life as we know it. That I may not have known when I was the young mother of young children, but as a grandmother, I know that. The grander perspective makes a difference.
And grandparents can also go for counseling and help too. We don't have a model for counseling them. We give them the same treatment that we give the 12-year-olds and 15-year-olds, and yet it requires some very special strategies and techniques when you work with a different population.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and of course, you know, I feel like pounding my forehead. Of course, as society gets more isolated, every aspect of society gets more and more isolated. So what do we do to find that balance as well? So we are coming to the end, I think, of where we are. So with that, we're really at the end. Any last thoughts you want to leave folks with?
No, I'm fine. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk with you.
It has been a wonderful privilege being able to chat with you, and as a result, I feel calmer and more optimistic. So thanks for spreading a little joy my way. And I wanted to let everybody know the next person is Byron Katie, and that's a pre-record. So at this point, you should have received an email to let you know how to tune in. Thanks again, Jon, for being part of our Mental Health and Happiness Day.
Namaste.
Namaste.